During a routine composting operation, many of our variables are controlled. We know what kind of carbon we have, we know all of our conditions and our mixes, but during an emergency composting operation, where a lot of those variables are not within our control. We don't always choose the type of carbon material that we have. We're usually really pushing our carbon to nitrogen ratios. Because of that, there are problems that can occur during composting during an emergency environment. Typically, those consist of leachate being generated from the piles. And so you could, as you go around and you inspect your piles, you can see that there's leachate coming out of the bottom. That's a concern. It typically can be managed very easily by taking some dry material, putting it down on the leachate, absorbing it up, and then incorporating that into the pile. If it gets to be a significant problem and you're having leachate that continues to come out of the windrow, you might have a broader problem that's going to need to be addressed by taking more aggressive action. Typically that means bringing in more carbon, opening up that section of the pile that is having the leachate problem, adding that drier material in, getting a good mix, and then recapping the windrow. Another problem that you'll have is with temperatures. Sometimes you'll have temperatures that don't reach the levels that we need in order to inactivate the virus. That can be a real problem, and it can be caused by a number of different factors. One of those factors is that you don't have your ratios right. So you might have an operation that's got not enough carbon and too much nitrogen, in which case, again, you might need to amend that a little bit. One of the other problems is that moisture. At times you can have too much moisture in a pile, and so you're not getting the oxygen flowing because all of your pore spaces are filled up with water. So again, to address that, you're going to have to add more dry material to the compost windrow in order to get that ratio of carbon to nitrogen and to get that moisture where it needs to be in order to effectively generate temperatures. One of the other problems that we see related to temperatures is if the process is not designed appropriately and we don't have a good base under a windrow, then you're not getting the oxygen flowing into the pile that we need. Again, that's a situation where the windrow may need to be modified in order to have the appropriate construction with a good base, a core, and a cap to make it work effectively. There are some other issues that we encounter as well. One of them is a fly problem. That's really key that we manage all of our vectors, including flies. And one of the causes of that is we have a lot of birds that might be on the surface because it wasn't capped appropriately or because our cap settled. So it's really important to make sure that we get those birds well incorporated. Now, a cap can be 4 inches, it could be 6 inches, and it really depends upon the material that we're using. If we have a really dry material that allows a lot of air to flow through it, then a lighter cap is not really going to eliminate the odors that are going to attract the flies. So depending upon your choices of material, your cap thickness may vary. But regardless, if you see that you're having a bad problem with odors, that might be drawing flies, or you're having predators come in digging out carcasses out of the pile, then you're going to need to increase your cap in order to address that problem. Another type of cap that you can use in addition to your carbon cap is by adding a composting fleece. Now, a composting fleece is different than a plastic coating or a tarp because a compost fleece allows the pile to breathe, whereas using a tarp or plastic simply shuts off all the oxygen from the pile and actually impair the composting process. So with a fleece, it has some benefits during particularly cold weather because it helps add some additional insulation, and it also might add some benefits if you're in a rainy season or if you're just going to have a lot of precipitation and you want that to shed because you're concerned about having too much moisture in the compost windrow. So those are a couple of times that you could use a composting fleece. It does have some downsides. When you use a composting fleece, it requires a lot of material if you have a lot of windrows. And one of the other problems with a composting fleece is that with a composting fleece, it is shedding the water, but when it sheds the water to the side of the windrow, which at times can cause water to collect at the bottom, absorb in, and actually kill the oxygen flow into the pile by having too much pore space filled up with water. So there aren't many applications of a composting fleece during normal routine conditions, but in extreme colds or during extremely wet periods, if you manage the runoff from those piles, there are applications for using a compost fleece.